of Amsuman, and we're reading text 30. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Soyam Brahmarsi Varyaste. Soyam Brahmarsi Varyaste. Rajarsi Parvarat Vibo. Rajarsi Parvarat Vibo. Katam Maharti Dharmagya. Katam Maharti Dharmagya. Vadam Pitur Ivatmaja. Vadam Pitur Ivatmaja. Soyam Brahmarsi Varyaste. Rajarsi Pravarat Vibo. Katam Maharti Dharmagya. Vadam Pitur Vivatmaja. Sojam Brahmarsi Varyaste. Rajarsi Pravarat Vibo. Katam Maharti Dharmagya. Vadam Pitur Vivatmaja. Soyam Brahmarsi Varyaste. Rajarsi Parvarat Vibo. Kartam Maharshi Arja. Kartam Pitur Vivatmaja. Soyam Brahmarsi Varyaste. Rajarsi Parvarat Vibo. Sampitur Vivatmaja. Soyam Brahmarsi Varyaste. Rajarsi Pravarat Vibo. Karta Maharti Varamaja. Vadam Pitur Vivatmaja. Ladies. Soyam Brahmarsi Varyaste. Rajarsi Pravarat Vibo. Karta Maharti Dharmagya. Vadam Pitur Vivatmaja. Karta Maharti Dharmagya. Vadam Pitur Vivatmaja. Saha, he, the Brahmana. Ayam, this. Brahmarishivarya, not only a Brahmana, but the best of great sages. Or Brahmarshis. Te, also from you. Rajarishi Parvarat, who are the best of all saintly kings. Or Rajarshis. Vipo, O Master of the State. Katam, how? Arhati, he deserves. Dharmagya, O you who are quite aware of religious principles. Vadham, killing. Pituhu, from the father. Eva, like. Atmajaha, the son. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada Ki Jai. My Lord, you are completely aware of the religious principles. As a son never deserves to be killed by his father, here is a Brahmana who should be protected by the king and never killed. How does he deserve to be killed by a Rajarsi like you? Purport. The word Rajarsi refers to a king who behaves like a rishi or sage. Such a king is also called Naradeva because he is considered a representative of the Supreme Lord. Because his duty is to rule the kingdom, to maintain Brahminical culture. Because his duty is to rule the kingdom, to maintain Brahminical culture, he never desires to kill a Brahmana. Generally, a Brahmana, woman, child, old man, or cow, is never regarded as punishable. Thus, the wife of the Brahmana requested the king to refrain from this sinful act. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stabitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadanayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Pajitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we have not only the killing of a Brahmana, but the devouring, the eating of a Brahmana also, just to prove the point. Just to interesting point here in the purport is about the king, because his duty is to rule the kingdom to maintain Brahminical culture. So it indicates that actually is the purpose of any society, any king, any ruler, is to maintain Brahminical culture, right? And we've just heard here, yesterday, we had some symptoms of the Brahmana, chief of them, of course, that he is engaged daily in Brahminical activities. So being a Brahmana is a varna, it's an occupation, it's a job title. So we're not all Brahmanas. We are, hopefully, to a certain extent at least, Brahminical, however. So Brahmana, Brahminical, what is, we have like three terms that we should distinguish. We have Brahminical culture, we have Brahminical behavior or Brahminical lifestyle, and we have a Brahmana, who is like, that's the job title of the guy who maintains the Brahminical standard, right? Because that's sometimes what becomes a little bit difficult in our society is that, basically, bottom line, nobody wants to be the Sudra, right? Whenever Prabhupada talks about Varnashram and society and the different layers of human society, sometimes the Shudra is not exactly described in the most flattering terms. It's wretched and poor and doesn't know what's going on, so naturally nobody wants to be the Shudra, right? So in order to understand this, there are various ways of doing that. One way is just to ignore it. Oh, that probably, never mind. He probably doesn't mean anything by it, which is not the most intelligent way to go about it, because he kind of seems to point it out in pretty much every chapter of every book he's written, right? It's just literally everywhere. So this idea that we don't follow Varnashram, you'd have to just rip out half the pages of Prabhupada's books. Or just think, oh, he probably made a mistake repeatedly hundreds of times by saying these things, right? Which none of those really ring very well, right? That seems like a little bit weird. So we have to go another way, and the way we go about it is that we're not actually Shudras. We're devotees, right? Because the only reason it's poor to be a Shudra is if you identify as such, if that is your identity. If I'm a blacksmith and smithing will make me happy, that's poor. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm Lionel Messi, the best footballer in the history of the world. Footballing will make me happy. I'm a multi-millionaire, if not billionaire, and that's going to make me happy. Just as poor. No difference. That is poor, right? But if I'm a devotee, my occupation has to be a blacksmith, not a problem, right? Because you have some occupation. There's in any life, there's some work. There's no way that life can go on without some kind of work. And so in society, certain amounts of work has to be done, and not all of them are Brahminical work, right? There's only so many sacrifices you can do. There's only so many doctors you need, or classes need to be given, whatever, right? So you're not going to have a society of brahmanas as an occupation, so therefore we do the needful. Whatever needs to be done, you need some people to rule the practical, like, ruling of the country. You need some people some vaishyas to make sure that growth is happening in terms of farming, in terms of business going on, so the produce can be distributed to the people. And you need some people to just do whatever needs to be done. That is pretty much 90% of all work that has to happen in society is just regular work, right? And that's fine, because if you do it for Krishna, you can do anything. There's no difference in that way. Like, Krishna is not particularly impressed with a guy who lives in a big palace, because it's his palace anyway, right? It's like you walk into someone's house, you borrow the furniture, and then you invite him for dinner. He's going to come see his own furniture there. He's not going to be impressed by the furniture. Krishna knows everything's his already, so we can't really, we're impressed, because we're trying to be God. So the more we can control and enjoy and arrange, and if we can do a little shed, that's one thing. Okay, a 5-bedroom house, a little bit better. A palace, now you're talking, right? That's our problem. Krishna is not an illusion like that. So we shouldn't be self-conscious about having like a regular position in society. That has absolutely nothing to do with Krishna consciousness, right? Because the problem is that we hear, and this is like, very senior devotees sometimes talk about, we don't follow the Vedic, or we don't follow an ashram, we're like devotees and we're beyond all that. And that's like, well, hey, let's look through Prabhupada's books and see how he describes society. He describes it in 2 ways. That's Varnashram and protection of brahmanas and cows. That is society. So if we call ourselves ISKCON, let's decipher that for a moment. International Society for Krishna Consciousness. How are we not going to follow Varnashram? Knock me out, right? We have to figure out how to make that work. We can't just kind of toss it to the side and say, oh, he probably didn't mean that, or we're beyond that. Someone who's beyond Varnashram would never say he's beyond Varnashram, right? They would do it naturally, because what does it mean to be beyond? It means you're a devotee. You're a devotee of God. And so in Bhagavad Gita it's clearly stated that Krishna made the 4 divisions of life, and they are eternal. So if you're devoted to God, why would you not be devoted to whatever he creates and his rules and his expansions, the universe, right? You'd naturally follow. So anyone who's beyond Varnashram, you'd say he follows anyway, but he doesn't follow because those are the rules. He follows because it's Krishna. That's where we get to like the levels of advanced devotion, is that instead of seeing me and then the universe and then trying to connect that to Krishna, you see Krishna and then you decipher it back to me. How does that relate back to me? right? So that's advanced. Then you don't have to follow any rules because you're going to do it anyway. And if you break the rules, it's because there's a higher principle. You don't have to worry about it, right? So like in second chapter, Arjuna has some doubts about the whole thing. The whole situation seems a bit, let's say, controversial, right? Why are you engaging me in warfare if you're so all loving, right? It doesn't make any sense. But actually, the warfare, paradoxically, it seems, is all loving because we're clearing out a lot of bad karma in just like one fell swoop, right? So even though you'd say that according to the Vedic you should be non-violent, in this case, technically what appears to be violent is not. It's liberating. Everybody gets liberated, right? So whenever it appears that a brahmana or an advanced devotee is not following the principles or the rules, it's because they're following a higher principle, right? If Rupa Goswami doesn't show up for Mangala Arati, it's not because he's been out late eating pizza, it's because he's been writing poetry for 18 hours. He just forgot all about time and he just missed it, right? So this idea, we're devotees, we're spontaneous, we're this, we're that, so I'm just going to show up if I feel like it. That's not spontaneous, that's sporadic. And that's a different word, right? So we have to be exact, especially when we're on this level of sadhakas. We have to be very exact about what do things mean, because otherwise it gets very muddy. And when our mind is not naturally attracted, that's what sadhaka means, that we're not naturally attracted to these activities, that only on an intellectual level do we know that if we follow, it will be liberating, more liberating than if we follow our mind, right? When we're on that level where it is on an intellectual level rather than an attachment level, we have to be very exact about what is going on, and we have to be very careful not to speculate, right? So that's why the description that Prabhupada gives, like protection of brahmanas and cows. The cows are very dear to Krishna, and the brahmanas uphold these principles, right? And it doesn't mean that a brahmana has to be like squeaky clean. No, I mean, sometimes that's the thing. Like if a brahmana makes a mistake, it's like, he's never a brahmana. He's just like kind of pretending. But have you read Bhagavatam? It's like filled with brahmanas who make like overreact. The whole thing starts with a brahmana overreacting, right? So they make plenty of mistakes, but it's just, this is like what's the point in Uddhava Gita in the 11th canto, which is coming up later, is that it's not about not making mistakes. It's about realizing what are mistakes and what's not mistakes, right? The real problem only comes when we start justifying whatever mistakes we make. Like, okay, I'm not following something very well. Okay, that's probably not that important. Just chant Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Then we start getting into trouble because the mind will wander. This is Bhagavad Gita. It's the flickering light, right? And when the mind wanders, and in 11th canto it's described as a horse that kind of just jolts to one side or the other. It will wander. The question is, what do you do about it? Like, because if you try to control it, you can't. You can't control the mind. It's always moving. It's like any internal organ is always active. It's not like your lungs take a break for half an hour. It would produce a problem, right? So in the same way, that's just the nature of the mind. That's not a problem. The problem is if you don't control the mind controls you. So then you start veering off, and if you don't have this framework of Vedic culture, then what are you going to measure it by? It's like, if you don't know where the line is, how do you know if you've crossed it? It's fine if you cross it, because we're human beings. We make mistakes constantly. Anyone who tries to kind of make an analysis of every single day of their life will know that half of what we do is kind of like, doesn't really turn out the way we want it. That's not the problem. The problem is, what do you do about it, right? There are three options. One option is you justify it. Well, as the temple president usually ends up, getting that's usually who we complain about. Just as a side point, interesting, so many devotees seem to like to be thought of as Kshatriyas, because it's always the Kshatriyas we complain about. So I don't know why that is. But so we justify it. That's one way. That's not very good, because then you're just moving the goalpost. You can justify more and more things. If you're really well practiced, you can just come up with very elaborate explanations for why it's okay for you specifically to not follow the same standards as you would expect from anyone else, right? That's not going to lead anywhere good. The other one is to throw yourself to the floor and roll around lamenting and wailing and, oh, I'm such a wretched, miserable, it's so hard being me, and I'm such a poor devotee and I don't know anything. And this is just pretty much the same thing, just in the negative instead, right? So now it's still all about me, but it's just like I can get some attention from being like, having like negative self-esteem, right? Also not a very good solution, because why would that be pleasing to Krishna? And so then you have the third option, which is just correct it, get on with it, right? It's not a big deal. I mean, if you don't think it's a big deal, that's a big deal. But if you know that it's serious, then it's not a big deal. It's not about mistake, not mistake. It's just about correct it, get on with it, right? And that's what the Vedic culture, the Vedic lifestyle provides. It provides a framework for us to understand whether we're on the right path or not. And that's the problem with the modern society, is that you don't have a standard. If everything is democracy and we just kind of throw out a vote, anything can be anything, right? And you see it's always fluctuating, like this whole idea of political correctness. It constantly fluctuates. I saw one, just like a funny story, just top of my head, right? That Disney had fired one of their movie directors because they had dug up some old tweets from like 10 years ago where he was apparently homophobic or racist or something, right? And they were fearing like a backlash from the internet of political correctness, that they would have such a movie director with the company who was apparently a homophobe or a racist, whatever, right? Now what happened was they got a huge backlash for firing him. Because, oh, you're digging up these tweets from 10 years ago, who cares? And so the internet erupted in hatred over that. So it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? There's no standard. So how are you going to act? And you see that people constantly, it's just like overflow. So there are two options in the face of that, is either social anxiety or basically sociopathy, right? Those are the two ways you can react. Either you stop, either you just become paralyzed and unable to act, or you stop seeing human beings as humans. You see them as objects that you navigate through. Those are basically your two ways of, and sometimes you fluctuate between them a couple of times during a day, right? Because if there's no standard of behavior, how do you know where you are? So it's an interesting thing. I'm based in London now, and when preaching to people, it's an interesting thing. You have to kind of figure out where are they before you can even talk to them, because you never know what's going to offend someone or what's going to. It's just there's no standard, right? So that's why this is very important. Yeah. Any questions on this? This like society or no society, Brahminical culture. See, because okay, I'll go on a little bit. Because it's entirely possible to be a complete Shudra and be completely Brahminical at the same time, right? Brahminical is a state of mind you can live a Shudra lifestyle completely Brahminical. But there is no Shudra lifestyle. There's only Brahminical lifestyle. That's why it's so important to have a society, because otherwise, if it was like such a yuga, you just like have, there's not much society going on because everyone is in the complete mode of goodness, and you're just like, the only questions you really have is this my bucket or yours, right? That's pretty much it, because nobody has any attachment, so you don't have a lot of things to fight about. right? But now we're in Kali Yuga, and it's a slightly different story. So then you need someone to uphold these principles, so the attachments don't run off with us, right? That maintain these 4 levels of society, and it works out pretty well, because God made it, so God is usually pretty on the ball with whatever he does. So that the distribution of mentalities in society mirror what needs to be done to make a society run. Right? So you have a majority of Shudras by mentality. You have a majority of Shudra labor or work that has to be done in a society. And so then you have a small fraction of society that are Dvijas, that actually administer and manage and lead the whole thing, right? And so everything works out. But then when you get into the material where we're looking at Krishna's energies as valuable instead of Krishna himself, and the energies in the devotional sense, the energies only having value in so much that we connect it back to Krishna, right? Otherwise it's completely useless. But if we start believing that the energy itself has value, and that to the extent I can control the energy, I have value, then it's suddenly a completely different story. Then you end up with either democracy or communism, and history shows that neither of them are really that working out that well. The last century was a tragedy of communism. 100 million plus people actually died from it, and we can see how democracy is basically killing the planet as such, right? We may not in millions be executing our own citizens, but we don't have to, because we control them by other means. I mean, let's bring up a random example, social media again. Right? You just pacify people, they're just scrolling through their news feed all day, and they're not really going to revolt, right? You have tiny protests here and there, but mostly they're happening online, so it doesn't really matter anyway. And then you just flood them with fake news or whatever weird stories, and they can't make out what's right and wrong anyway, right? So it works really well, except that democracy is it's a very effective way of executing consumerism. So it's basically consuming the entire planet, right? So it doesn't really work that well. So then we have to accept that only God's plans work. We don't have a better plan, right? So that's why Varnashram is there, because you have the Shudras, they get whatever they want. You could call it communism in a sense, but then it's governed by Vaishyas who knows what needs to be done in order for profit to be made. And that would be like kind of your democracy. But to control that so it doesn't run amok, you have Kshatriyas who are well versed in the principles of Dharma and uphold the Dharmic principles. So that's kind of like a kingdom, like what's the word? Huh? Yeah, monarchy. I was stuck on monastery. No, it's not monastery. Monarchy. Yeah, thank you. Monarchy. But then the problem with these guys is that they're dealing with so much passion, so many desires they have to control, that they kind of take them on themselves. And so there are various ways to kind of release that. And one thing is like big kingdoms and multiple wives and stuff. And another thing is that they can have a council of brahmanas that are not attached, because they just don't take part, right? So they are level-headed. So they don't get affected by all these things that are going on, because basically there's nothing the world has that they want, and they don't have anything the world can take away from them. So there's no need to be nervous, right? So they're cool. So then you have those 4 levels, everyone's included, and everything is balanced. It works out pretty well. And for us, because we're modern people, we're trying to be devotees, but we're modern people, we have an innate fear/resentment of authority, because it feels like we're being restricted, right? So when we're being put in one of these boxes, like Vaishya, Shudra, whatever, it feels like all the options are disappearing. What about my freedom to act? But we have to understand that, first of all, we have to understand their guidelines. There are many ways of being a Shudra or Vaishya, or, it's not in that sense a box. But on top of that, we have to understand that what's being removed are all the options that don't work anyway, right? Because we have a nature. If we try to act against it, it will not work. It's just not going to work, You have people in this supposed free world who try for years and years and years to make a business work, and it just doesn't work because they're not Vaishyas. Maybe they're artists, maybe they're extremely good at painting or whatever, right? But because they don't have that business mentality. I don't have it myself. I tried it actually before I became a devotee, and it did not go well, And I was like, why is this happening? So if we understand our nature, then everything becomes easier, right? And so the next question is, how do I understand my nature? Don't worry, you're a Shudra. Because anyone who's not, they are not thinking like that. A Vaishya by nature, don't worry, it's never a good class unless at least one telephone goes off. A Vaishya, he's too busy doing business to talk about whether or not he's a Vaishya, right? A Kshatriya, he's too busy getting things straight and right without worrying about what Varna he is. And a Brahmana, he's reading, he's not even thinking. Maybe he's thinking about it in a theoretical sense, but he's not worried about. So if we're thinking, what Varna am I? We're Sudras, and it's glorious because we're devotees, and it doesn't matter anyway. There's a whole is it first or second canto? I think it's second canto. There's a whole glorification of the Shudra. It's a brilliant way of going back to Godhead. You just do whatever needs to be done and go back to Godhead. You don't have to worry about, all the conflicts. Like the Vaishya, inherently in his job, is lying. You can't tell people what you bought your stuff for because they won't want to buy it for any more than what you bought it for. So you just can't be honest as a Vaishya. It's just part of it, right? And with the Kshatriya, you're dealing with all this kind of diplomacy and politics, and you have to go to war and stuff. Who wants that? Everyone complains about you. Whenever someone complains, I'm giving a class, someone is complaining, 95% of the time it's the temple president, right? Isn't it? So why do we want to be there, right? And the Brahmana, it's boring. If you're not a Brahmana by nature, it is excruciatingly boring to sit and read for 6 hours straight. You just can't do it. So why would you? If you're a devotee, you're already beyond. Why not just be a Shudra, have a nice life, and go back to Godhead? Hari Bol, right? But this idea that no, we don't need to follow, that we cannot do that. We just cannot do that. And that's something we see repeatedly and consistently in ISKCON, is cherry picking. We cherry pick the quotes from Prabhupada that underline or back up whatever we think or whatever we want done, and whatever he says that goes the other way, we kind of just skip ahead over that and don't worry about that. And he was from India, it was a different time. No, if Prabhupada put something in his books, it means it's important. Like if you can say morning conversations, letters, they're meant for specific devotees in specific situations. There's a specific mood, so we would have to take them a little bit lighter. Just because Prabhupada said something at a morning walk doesn't mean you can project that onto any devotee you feel like. It may be a very, very specific situation. But if it's in Bhagavatam, if it's in Bhagavad Gita, it's important. It's not something, he probably didn't mean that. No, Prabhupada was not, he was very meticulous. Let's take ISKCON again. International means transcendental. It means non-sectarian, right? That's your sambandha. Society means varnashram. That's how it's defined. It means how you act. For Krishna consciousness, prayojana. It's the goal, where we're going. Prabhupada doesn't randomly come up with these things. If you know how to analyze, you can see everything follows the Vedic principles. So this idea, no, Prabhupada, he kind of invented stuff or he changed stuff. No, it's just because you can't see it. Educate yourself before you say something like that. So if it's in there, it's important. Try to look through Bhagavatam and see if you can find a chapter where Prabhupada doesn't mention Varnashram. It's difficult. It's everywhere, right? So this idea we don't follow Varnashram, it's stupid. It's dumb. I don't care how long you've been around. So we have to make it work. That's what the Brahmana can do. He can synthesize these things. When you have apparent contradictions, he's able to put them together and see, no, because this, because that. So, like, are you a Shudra or aren't you? Well, you are by activity, but you aren't by identity, right? So it's both. It's not that one of them are wrong. So you're beyond. You don't worry about it. You're not rich. You're not poor if you just have a job. But your job is a Shudra occupation, because that's just 90% of what needs to be done. And it's great. It's the best way to be a devotee. It's the easiest way, because the Dvija ways, they get you distracted all the time. You know, it's like if you have a car and you're driving around, what's the risk that you're going to crash the car? It's fairly low. Okay, it's India. It's a bad example. I'm from Europe, you know, it's a good example in Europe. Okay, I'm just going to go, pretend we're in Europe, and you're driving around your car. What's the risk that you're going to crash the car? It's not very big, you know. My parents have been driving for 50 years. They have never crashed a car. So what if you're a race car driver? They crash several cars every year, right? So if you don't want to crash a car, don't be a race car driver. I mean, they get the glory and they get the champagne, and okay, that's non-Vedic, but anyways, a lot of attention, but they're pushing it, you know. That's what happens when you get into this Dvija country, you're pushing it. So you see, that's where you risk falling down. I mean, you know, if you have a war and the general is walking in the front of his army, he's in a very risky position. I mean, today, of course, the generals are sitting in a bunker with the internet connection, of course, so it's a different thing. It's demonic society. But if you're pushing yourself ahead in society, you run the risk of falling down because you're dealing with more energy. It's just how it is. We're very small, and energy is bigger than us, right? So this whole idea that we want to be Vaishyas, we want to be rich, we want to be powerful. Let's have a look at them. You know, in society, in modern society, all the rich, powerful people, they're kind of neurotic, to be honest. Like the superstars in Hollywood, there's like a 15-minute gap between rehab and back on drugs. You know, there's not really any normal, it's very, very few of them that actually have a normal life. You know, the majority have kind of not, and then of course if you walk out of your door and you've got immediately 20 cameras on you, that's going to be pressure, right? And it doesn't matter what you do, everybody has an opinion. That's not fun, right? So just living a natural, like, family life that's how God intended, right? It's very balanced, it's very nice, and it's very peaceful, and you go back to Godhead. So that's a little bit on that. Hare Krishna. Any questions, comments, complaints? Prabhu? Do we have a microphone?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for nice class. You emphasized so much in the Varna Ashram. Srila Prabhupada, in the last time in Vrindavan, he said that 50% are left, which was, he mentioned, Varna Ashram. This. So we see in ISKCON, we speak always philosophy and then the book distribution, so many other projects. But Varnashram is really not, a few people really speak.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, is because is it not time to really, we are not ready for Varnashram? We are preaching mode now? Or?
Okay, so Yeah, so first of all, you mentioned correctly that we often talk philosophy and stuff, but so varnashram is applied philosophy, right? It's just what do you do about the philosophy? You apply it into life, and on the level of society, varnashram is just the framework that you use. Whether or not we're ready, well, maybe not, but I think there are two issues here. One is it's not understood. Very often when we talk about ashram, it's like something with a farm and a cow. But that's like only 1/2 is varna. That's 1/2 of an ashram. 1/4 of that, that's 1/8 is vaishya, and 1/2 of that is farming. So it's like a 1/16 of varnashram we think is the whole thing, right? Is farming and cow protection and stuff. But no, varnashram is everything in society is varnashram. So we have to understand that it's not a matter of do we want to implement it or not. It is implemented. That Krishna says that in 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that he made this system and it is eternal. So it's not like we don't have a choice, right? So that's one of the things I hear often in London is that no, we can't implement varnashram because it's London, it's too chaotic and people are they're suffering and it's too busy. But it's like, no, it's the other way around. You're suffering and too busy because you're not following varnashram. So you put the cart before the horse. You say, whenever I get all my material desires fulfilled, I'll implement varnashram. It's never going to happen. It's the other way around. You want to be peaceful, you follow varnashram. Don't worry if other people follow. You follow, it works. So I'll give you an example. On the varna side, you have the principle for each varna. The Shudra is just humility. You just do your duty. The Vaishya is generosity, charity. Kshatriya is protection. And Brahmana is detachment. If you are in any of these 4 varnas and you just use that principle, everybody will like you. If you have a job, you're Shudra. Anyone who has a job, they're Shudra. And if you're not too proud and complaining about that, you're good. People like you. You'll do well, right? If you're a businessman, you make a ton of money, but you give away part of it to charity. Nobody has a problem that you're making a ton of money, right? If you're in a position of power and you make sure that everyone feels heard and protected, you don't have to do what they say. You can tell them to do stuff they don't want. They still feel protected. They'll do it anyway. And if you're a Brahmana, you want people to listen to what you're saying, you have to be detached. So that means if I step down from this asana and go out and drive off in a Ferrari, some people are going to be like, that was a weird move, right? But if I live simply, everyone's pretty cool with what I'm saying because I'm detached. I'm not trying to make you do anything. I'm just saying this is what it is. Do what you want, right? So if you follow those principles, it doesn't matter if people know about varnashram, they will respect you. You will be successful. So varnashram works whether people know it or not. And you're going to follow whether you like it or not. You can either do it willfully and get good results, or you can do it kicking and screaming, right? So that's one thing, that we don't actually understand, that it's there. It's like, should we implement gravity? Wouldn't it be nicer if we could just float off to work through the air every day? It's so archaic, it's so old-fashioned, this gravity thing that you have to walk on the ground. It's Krishna's laws. It's not, we don't implement anything, right? It's there, you know about it, you understand it, it works. You don't know about it, you do it anyway, it still works. It's like exercise. You don't have to understand what muscle groups are working, you do it, it works. So that's one thing. The other thing is that we have this inner resentment of authority. It's just Kali Yuga, we just don't like authority because we want to be the authority. So that means when you have a principle, a framework that is beyond discussion, then generally we don't like that. We feel boxed in, right? But actually, like we were saying before, what we're removing are all the options that don't work anyway, right? You've seen these, there's these talent shows on TV. I don't watch TV, but I've seen a few clips. And you see people, like thousands of people lining up in a queue to go to these song auditions. And you can just see 95% of them should just really have stayed home. We keep watching because it's fun to see someone try something that they're really, really horribly bad at. But you know what? How much time do they spend trying to become a singer when it's just everybody can just see straight off the bat it's never gonna happen, babe? You know? So that's the problem with this supposedly free society, is that all people run around, get all weird ideas about how they're going to become popular and beloved and stuff like that, and they waste the best part of their life trying something that's never going to work, right? So that's why Varnashram actually, it gives you freedom, it doesn't take it away. So those are the two problems we have. One, we don't know what it is. Two, we don't like it, because that's when you get afraid of something, is when you don't understand it, right? Fear is always something lurking that you can't quite define it. The moment you can define what it is, it stops being scary. So that's the problem. So it's lack of education, and it bites itself in the end, because how do you get education? Brahminical society. That enlightens the population. If you don't have it, you know, how many devotees actually read Prabhupada's books? Senior devotees even. Some of the discussions that are going on is just like, wow, you know. So that's the problem. It's not respected. Is that okay? Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Comments, questions? Jai Ho. Randaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. Hare Krishna. Yeah. Sure. Do you do this WhatsApp thing? Yeah.